The story of Thomas Alva Edison begins not in a grand laboratory filled with light and machinery, but in a small, quiet town, Milan, Ohio, in the mid-19th century. It was 1847, and America was still young, growing, and restless with change. The Industrial Revolution was spreading its wings, and steam engines puffed through the countryside. But far from the great cities, a boy with wide eyes and restless hands was about to begin a journey that would one day change the rhythm of human life forever. That boy was Thomas. From the very beginning, he was unlike the others. His teachers saw a child who couldn't sit still, who questioned too much, who stared out the window when he was supposed to be memorizing his lessons. But what they called distraction was in truth imagination. What they saw as mischief was a kind of hunger, a thirst for understanding the world not as it was told to him, but as he could touch, test, and transform with his own hands. The young Edison's curiosity was boundless. Every object, every noise, every shadow intrigued him. He once dismantled his mother's watch just to see how it ticked, only to realize he couldn't put it back together again. Yet, instead of being scolded, he was encouraged by his mother, Nancy Edison, who believed deeply in his potential. She understood that her son's mind worked differently, that he was not slow, as some teachers thought, but gifted in a way that the world had not yet learned to measure. His mother became his greatest teacher. She withdrew him from school and taught him at home, giving him not just lessons from books but lessons for life. Under her care, Edison discovered the world of reading, and with it, the universe of ideas. He devoured everything he could find: history, mechanics, chemistry, and the great works of science. The young boy's imagination began to take form, built upon the foundations of knowledge and guided by the endless desire to experiment. As the years passed, the boy's curiosity grew into something larger, a force. He was fascinated by how things worked and even more by how they could be improved. The trains that roared across the Ohio tracks, the telegraph lines that whispered messages through wires. All of it stirred something deep inside him. He began to wonder not only what made them function, but what else could be done with them. At the age of 12, Edison took his first job as a newsboy on the Grand Trunk Railroad line. It was an unusual place for a young scientist to begin, but for Edison, every environment was a laboratory. Between stops, he sold newspapers, candy, and vegetables, but more importantly, he observed the world of technology around him. The clatter of the train wheels, the smell of iron and oil, the telegraph operators tapping codes, all became the sounds and sights of inspiration. In a corner of one of the train cars, Edison set up a small laboratory of his own. It was a modest space filled with bottles, wires, and bits of metal he had collected. Passengers would look curiously as he mixed chemicals or tested small devices. It wasn't long before one of his experiments, involving phosphorus, ended disastrously. A spark ignited, setting fire to the car. Edison was forced to abandon his rolling laboratory, and his chemicals were thrown out the window. But even that didn't stop him. If anything, it strengthened his resolve. Every failure became a lesson. Every mistake, a step closer to mastery. This pattern, of learning through doing, of failing and trying again, became the blueprint of his life. Edison was not born a genius. He became one through relentless curiosity and a deep belief in the power of experimentation. He learned not from theories alone but from practice, touching, building, breaking, and rebuilding. The world around Edison in those days was changing fast. Telegraph lines stretched across America, linking cities for the first time. Steam engines roared, printing presses churned, and scientific ideas filled the air like electricity waiting to be harnessed. But for Edison, these were not just marvels to admire, they were challenges. He looked at every invention and wondered how it could be better, faster, smaller, more efficient. He began experimenting with telegraphy, fascinated by the magic of transmitting messages over wires. The rhythmic tapping of Morse code was music to his ears, a hidden language of communication and possibility. Late at night, When others slept, Edison would stay awake with his instruments, learning every sound, every signal, and every glitch. Soon, he could fix broken telegraph machines with ease. By his mid-teens, he was not just using telegraphs, he was modifying them, inventing improvements that seasoned operators would later adopt. The story of young Edison is filled with moments like these. Moments where his passion for discovery turned ordinary experiences into extraordinary beginnings. He didn't wait for opportunity, he created it. In an era when most children were content with school books, Edison built chemistry labs, learned electrical circuits, and dreamed of changing the way people lived. As the years rolled on, Edison's self-education became more intense. He subscribed to scientific journals and read about the experiments of great minds like Faraday, Franklin, and Newton. Each page added fuel to the fire of his imagination. But Edison's brilliance was not in copying others. It was in asking, "What's next?" He saw science not as something to study, but as something to expand. The more he experimented, the more he realized that curiosity was both his greatest gift and his greatest challenge. It drove him to try things others thought impossible, but it also meant living a life of endless trial and error. He would often work for days without rest, his clothes stained with chemicals, his hands burned, his notebooks filled with sketches and notes. To him, failure was not defeat, it was data. As he grew older, Edison's curiosity began to evolve into vision. The experiments that once entertained a boy were now shaping the mind of a future inventor. He no longer played with gadgets just for fun, he experimented with purpose. He began to understand that behind every device, every mechanism, was a principle waiting to be discovered. And if he could understand that principle deeply enough, he could improve it, or reinvent it entirely. Imagine a dimly lit room in the late 1850s. A young man sits by a flickering oil lamp, his eyes fixed on a crude experiment made of copper wire, magnets, and bits of glass. Around him are the remnants of 100 failed attempts. But still, he smiles, because each failure means he has learned something new. That was Edison, tireless, restless, always moving forward. His family often worried about him. They couldn't understand what drove him to such extremes. Why he spent hours tinkering with broken machines, or stayed up through the night testing reactions. But Edison wasn't chasing success, he was chasing understanding. He was driven by the belief that knowledge was not meant to be memorized. It was meant to be discovered, shaped, and used to make life better. In those early years, Edison's passion for experimentation began to merge with a moral sense of purpose. He saw invention not as a means to fame or wealth, but as a service to humanity. He once said, "Anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is success." To him, invention was not art for art's sake, it was a tool for progress. As he reached adulthood, Edison carried with him not only his childhood curiosity, but also the resilience that came from years of trial. He was prepared for the long road ahead, the countless failures, the sleepless nights, the skepticism of others. But inside him burned the same fire that had sparked when he first opened a watch or set up his first train lab experiment. The fire of curiosity, the light that would one day illuminate the world. That early spark of wonder, nurtured by his mother's faith and his own persistence, became the foundation of his genius. Every great invention that would come later, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, the light bulb, was born from that same habit of asking why, and daring to find out for himself. Edison's mind was a living workshop. He didn't see the world as finished, he saw it as a vast collection of possibilities waiting to be improved. Even as a teenager, he carried notebooks filled with sketches and formulas, notes about chemical reactions, and ideas for devices that didn't yet exist. To him, the act of experimenting was like breathing, essential, continuous, and deeply personal. In those days, few could imagine that this curious, slightly odd boy would one day revolutionize the world. But Edison was already building the habits that would make it possible. He had learned that invention begins not with a machine, but with a question, not with skill, but with curiosity, and not with certainty, but with the courage to explore the unknown. As he walked through the rural landscapes of Michigan, where his family later moved, Edison often gathered natural materials, flowers, insects, minerals, examining their structures with intense fascination. He built simple devices to test theories about motion and sound. Local townspeople often regarded him as eccentric, but the young inventor didn't care. To him, everything in nature was a clue to a hidden truth, waiting to be uncovered by those who dared to look closer. His curiosity even extended into human behavior. He observed how people interacted with machines, how they used them, and how they failed to. These observations became valuable later in life when he designed inventions not only based on scientific principles, but also on human needs. Edison's early fascination with people and their problems made him not just a scientist, but a humanist, an inventor for the masses. In those years of experimentation and discovery, Edison unknowingly developed the qualities that would define his legacy: patience, focus, creativity, and above all, resilience. For every failed experiment, he developed a deeper understanding of the process itself. He began to believe that success was not about one big discovery, but about thousands of small discoveries that gradually built upon one another. The boy who once burned down a train car lab was now becoming a man who could harness electricity itself. Yet the spirit that drove him remained unchanged, the same childlike curiosity, the same hunger to see what lay beyond the obvious. In this sense, Edison never really grew up, he simply grew wiser in how to use his curiosity. He carried the mind of a child into the body of an adult, combining wonder with discipline and imagination with method. This rare balance was the essence of his genius, the thing that made him different from every other inventor of his time. And so, as the sun set on the early chapters of Edison's life, the foundation was laid. His curiosity had done more than shape his mind, it had shaped his destiny. From the dusty workshops of his youth to the grand laboratories he would one day build, one thing never changed: his belief that the key to invention lay not in knowing all the answers, but in having the courage to ask the right questions. The world was changing, and Edison was ready to change with it, not by chance but by choice. He had learned that curiosity was the first spark of invention, and that every light, no matter how bright, begins with a single flame. The years that followed were the true test of Thomas Edison's spirit. What had begun as a childhood curiosity was now becoming a lifelong pursuit of discovery, one that would stretch his patience, his endurance, and even his faith in himself. Yet through every obstacle, he carried the same question that had fueled him since boyhood: how can this be improved? By his late teens, Edison's life had already been a collection of experiments, mistakes, and hard-earned wisdom. He was constantly on the move, working on telegraph lines across the Midwest, repairing equipment, learning from every wire he touched. The rhythmic pulse of Morse code was not just communication for him. It was music. Each click of the telegraph key spoke to him in patterns and possibilities. He studied the signals the way a musician studies notes, and soon, his hands could fix faults before his mind had even finished analyzing them. But what truly separated Edison from other operators was not just his technical skill. It was his relentless curiosity. He wasn't content to know how the telegraph worked, he wanted to know why it worked. He began building his own versions, taking them apart, adding switches, and experimenting with automatic transmission. He dreamed of sending multiple messages over a single wire, something no one had done before. For Edison, every job was a laboratory, and every piece of equipment was a potential invention waiting to be reborn. During this period, his nights became longer than his days. In small hotel rooms, he would light a candle and spend hours sketching circuits or testing coils of copper wire. The scent of burnt metal filled the air, but he didn't care. The process was what mattered. Edison had learned early that success was a journey, not a moment, a path carved by persistence and guided by curiosity. Sometimes, when the telegraph lines were silent, he would stare into the night sky and think about the future. What could electricity really do? Could it power more than just communication? Could it light homes, drive machines, or even record sound? These questions were like stars to him, distant, yet visible enough to follow. When Edison moved to Boston in 1868, the city was alive with industry and invention. Steam engines roared in the docks, and mechanical workshops buzzed with innovation. Here, his curiosity met opportunity. He worked as a telegraph operator by day, but at night, he turned his rented room into a workshop filled with batteries, tools, and chemical bottles. The neighbors often complained about the noises and smells, but Edison was unstoppable. He lived frugally, saving every cent to buy materials for experiments. One winter evening, after countless sleepless nights, he succeeded in building a device that automatically repeated telegraph signals. His first major invention. It was a small triumph, but for Edison it was a revelation. His ideas could take form, function, and even make life easier. His curiosity had led to creation, and creation had given him purpose. Boston marked a turning point. Edison realized that curiosity alone wasn't enough. It had to be organized, tested, and driven toward results. He began keeping meticulous notebooks, recording every detail of his experiments. Each page was filled with observations, questions, and sketches. If one idea failed, he would analyze why and start again. His curiosity had matured into a discipline, a scientific method that balanced imagination with precision. In 1869, he moved again, this time to New York City, the heart of progress and possibility. The city's skyline glittered with ambition, and its streets thrummed with invention. It was here that Edison's curiosity collided with destiny. While repairing a broken telegraph in a Wall Street office, he caught the attention of investors who saw potential in his talent. They offered him a chance to design an improved version of the stock ticker, a machine that transmitted stock prices over telegraph lines. Edison went to work immediately, and within days, he had not only repaired the system but redesigned it entirely. His version, the universal stock printer, was faster, more reliable, and capable of printing multiple copies simultaneously. The investors were astonished. When they asked for a price to buy his invention, Edison hesitated, unsure of its worth. They offered him $40,000, an enormous sum at the time. It was more money than he had ever imagined. But more importantly, it was validation that his curiosity could create value, that his experiments could shape industries. With that money, Edison built his first true laboratory in Newark, New Jersey. It wasn't much, just a few rooms filled with tools, wires, and glassware. But it was the physical embodiment of his lifelong curiosity. He could now experiment on his own terms, without waiting for approval or resources. Every morning, he walked into his lab like a painter entering a studio. The clatter of gears, the smell of metal, and the hiss of chemical reactions became his symphony. Inside those walls, Edison's curiosity took on new life. He worked on everything: improvements to telegraph systems, new electrical devices, even early versions of what would later become the telephone. To those who visited, it looked like chaos, a room filled with half-finished machines and burning wires. But to Edison, it was order. Every wire, every tool had a purpose, every failure had meaning. As his reputation grew, people began to see him not just as an inventor, but as a thinker, a man who could look at a problem from a new angle. Yet, Edison himself never saw his genius as something mystical. He believed it was born of curiosity and effort. "I never had a day in my life," he once said, "that I didn't learn something new." His curiosity didn't stop at machines. It extended to the people who helped him. He loved surrounding himself with bright minds, mechanics, chemists, and engineers. He listened to their ideas, challenged their assumptions, and encouraged them to explore their own questions. The lab became a living organism, an ecosystem of curiosity. Still, behind the brilliance, there was loneliness. Curiosity had a price. Edison's endless drive often kept him away from family and friends. Nights blurred into mornings as he worked through fatigue, his eyes red from lack of sleep. The lamps in his lab burned long after midnight, casting golden circles on piles of blueprints. But he didn't complain. To him, the act of discovery was reward enough. Every new invention deepened his understanding of the invisible forces that shaped the universe. Electricity fascinated him most. It was mysterious, alive, unpredictable, and he wanted to tame it. He experimented tirelessly with currents, filaments, and circuits, seeking a way to make light last longer and burn brighter. Many thought it couldn't be done, but Edison had learned something long ago. On that train car, the word impossible was just an excuse for those who stopped trying. Even as failures multiplied, his curiosity never dimmed. In his notebooks, one finds thousands of sketches and notes from this period, some brilliant, some disastrous. But taken together, they show the mind of a man who refused to give up. Edison was not chasing perfection, he was chasing understanding. He believed that if he explored deeply enough, if he tried enough variations, he would eventually uncover the truth. One night, while testing a new design for a light filament, Edison leaned back and watched as the wire glowed faintly in the dark. It wasn't perfect. It lasted only a few seconds before burning out. But in that brief moment, the room shimmered with possibility. He smiled quietly, knowing that he had seen the future flicker before his eyes. That glow was more than light. It was the embodiment of a lifetime's curiosity. The boy who had burned down a train car was now on the brink of illuminating the world. In those silent hours, Edison would often reflect on the journey that had brought him there. Every spark, every experiment, every question had been part of a greater story, a story of curiosity turning into creation. He had learned that discovery was not a straight line but a spiral, returning again and again to the same question, each time with deeper understanding. He often said that curiosity was the most powerful force in the world because it was the source of all progress. Without it, there would be no invention, no science, no art. It was curiosity that led humankind from darkness into light, both literally and figuratively. And in his life's work, Edison would prove that statement true. In his Menlo Park laboratory, which he would soon build, Edison turned curiosity into a methodical process, what he called invention to order. But even before that famous place existed, the foundation had been set. The young boy who asked too many questions had become the man who turned questions into inventions. To understand Edison's inventive mind is to understand that his curiosity was never passive. It wasn't the idle wondering of a dreamer, but the active, urgent curiosity of a doer. When he wanted to know how something worked, he built it, broke it, and rebuilt it until it yielded its secrets. When he wanted to know if an idea could function, he didn't theorize endlessly, he tested it. His laboratory was a playground for the mind where ideas could breathe and grow. This mindset, born from early curiosity, shaped everything he would later achieve. It was the invisible thread connecting his childhood experiments with his adult triumphs. It taught him that innovation was not a single act of genius, but a lifelong commitment to exploration. As he once told a young apprentice, "There's a way to do it better. Find it." That single sentence captured his entire philosophy. It was the voice of his inner curiosity speaking through him, the same voice that had guided him from the start. And so, as the story of Thomas Edison's early years draws toward its turning point, one truth becomes clear: his genius was not inherited or accidental. It was built, forged in the fires of curiosity, and tempered by countless experiments. The mind that would one day light the world was shaped not by comfort, but by wonder. Every great light begins as a spark, and Edison's spark was his insatiable desire to know more, to see more, to create more. It was curiosity that taught him patience, experimentation that taught him wisdom, and failure that taught him perseverance. These lessons became the invisible architecture of his mind, the framework upon which the entire edifice of modern invention would stand. In the quiet of his early laboratories, surrounded by the hum of electricity and the ticking of clocks, Edison could not have known that he was laying the groundwork for a new age, an age where light, sound, and motion would bend to human will. Yet, in every glowing filament, in every note from a phonograph, in every image projected onto a screen, there would always remain the faint echo of that first curiosity. The boy in Ohio, taking apart a watch, eager to know how time itself worked. That boy never disappeared. He lived on in every experiment, every sketch, every spark. For Edison, curiosity was not a phase of childhood, it was the essence of existence. It guided him through poverty and failure, through sleepless nights and endless trials. It made him fearless before the unknown. And as the world around him grew brighter, so did the legacy of his mind. His curiosity didn't just shape his inventions, it shaped the future of humanity. Because in the end, every discovery he made, every innovation he brought forth, was born from one simple truth: the greatest power in the universe is the desire to understand it. And for Thomas Alva Edison, that desire was a flame that never went out. In the dim glow of an oil lamp, long before the first electric light brightened a city street, Thomas Alva Edison worked through another endless night. His eyes, heavy with fatigue, moved carefully across sheets of notes. His hands, calloused, stained with chemicals, adjusted tiny screws and wires. Around him, the room buzzed faintly with the sound of small machines and the hum of possibility. Most men would have slept. But Edison was not most men. He believed sleep was a thief, stealing hours that could be used for creation. This was not obsession, it was purpose. The kind of purpose that burns brighter than exhaustion, deeper than comfort. Edison lived by a rhythm that few could endure. A rhythm of trial, failure, and endless repetition. He did not wait for inspiration, he chased it through sweat and smoke. His life was a laboratory, his time a tool, and his perseverance the spark that kept the fires of invention alive. Those who worked beside him in his early laboratories often told stories of his extraordinary endurance. They would arrive in the morning to find Edison already there, and when they left at night, he would still be at his bench, focused, silent, his mind racing through possibilities. He once worked for 3 days straight without rest, surviving only on coffee and sheer determination. When asked how he could go so long without sleep, he smiled faintly and said, "Sleep is for those who have nothing to do." That wasn't arrogance. It was the belief that time was the only resource that truly mattered. For Edison, every second counted. Every hour wasted meant one less chance to discover something new. He once joked that he could rest when the world was fully illuminated, and so, he worked until that dream became real. To understand Edison's perseverance, one must understand his view of failure. To him, failure was not a wall, it was a stepping stone. Every broken filament, every useless design, every experiment that ended in smoke or silence brought him closer to success. He famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." But behind that quote lies something deeper. The soul of a man who refused to stop believing in progress, even when the world doubted him. When Edison began his quest to create a reliable, long-lasting electric light, the odds were stacked against him. Dozens of inventors had tried before and failed. The idea seemed impossible. The materials burned out too quickly, the wires melted, the glass cracked. But where others saw defeat, Edison saw a puzzle, a problem waiting for the right solution. He built experiment after experiment, testing every known material for the filament: platinum, copper, bamboo, horsehair, even human hair. His notebooks from that period record thousands of attempts, each numbered, each adjusted with small variations. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Workers came and went, exhausted by the endless cycle of testing. Yet Edison remained, driven by a force that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the human will. He once said, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." It was not just a clever line, it was the creed by which he lived. Every time an experiment failed, Edison didn't despair. Instead, he grew more certain that success was near. He believed that persistence had a mathematics of its own, that if he simply kept trying, the right combination would eventually appear. His assistants often recalled how he would laugh when things went wrong, saying, "Now we know one more thing that doesn't work." In those moments, Edison transformed failure into knowledge, and knowledge into power. His work ethic was not about speed, it was about endurance. He didn't seek quick results, he sought lasting ones. For him, the act of working itself was sacred, a ritual of discovery, a dialogue between man and nature. His life followed a rhythm of ceaseless motion. He would begin one project before finishing another, his mind juggling multiple ideas at once. While perfecting the light bulb, he was also experimenting with sound recording, developing early motion picture devices, and improving telegraph systems. His laboratory was a world of controlled chaos, dozens of assistants moving through the haze of smoke and the clatter of machines, while Edison moved among them like a conductor, guiding the symphony of invention. Yet even as his fame grew, his habits never softened. Wealth, recognition, and comfort never seduced him away from work. When visitors came to Menlo Park expecting to find a grand office or a man of leisure, they instead found Edison in worn clothes, sleeves rolled up, absorbed in an experiment. Fame was an afterthought to him. Invention was his real identity. The foundation of that relentless work ethic was his belief that success belonged to those who never stopped. He often said, "Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time." It was this belief that kept him moving forward when others gave in to fatigue or frustration. There were nights when failure felt endless. Once, during a particularly grueling series of tests, one of his assistants sighed in despair and said, "All our work has been in vain. We have learned nothing." Edison looked at him calmly and replied, "On the contrary, we have learned 1,000 things that won't work." That single sentence captured his philosophy. Progress was built not on success alone, but on persistence through failure. In many ways, Edison's work ethic was forged by necessity. He had known hardship since childhood. Poverty, deafness, and skepticism had surrounded him. He had no wealthy sponsors, no powerful family, no formal education. All he had was time, and the determination to use it better than anyone else. He once said that he could outwork any man alive, and history proved him right. Those who visited his laboratory described a strange kind of energy that filled the air. Not just the static of electricity, but the pulse of human willpower. It was as if the walls themselves absorbed his determination and reflected it back. Assistants often left exhausted, but Edison stayed, his focus unbroken. He worked not for hours but for results. The Menlo Park Laboratory became known as the Invention Factory. It was the world's first research and development center, and at its heart stood Edison, a man who believed that invention could be industrialized, that creativity could be organized through discipline. He managed his team with precision, pushing them to keep pace with his unstoppable rhythm. Yet he also inspired them. He didn't demand greatness, he demonstrated it. When success finally came, when the first practical light bulb glowed steadily through the night, it wasn't a miracle. It was the product of thousands of sleepless nights, countless broken wires, and endless patience. Edison didn't stumble upon light, he earned it through sheer endurance. The world saw the result, the glowing bulb, but only a few knew the years of labor, frustration, and persistence that had made it possible. That victory did not slow him down. If anything, it pushed him harder. The light bulb was not an end, it was a beginning. He immediately turned his attention to building electrical systems that could bring power to entire cities. The work expanded from the laboratory to the streets, cables, generators, dynamos, and power stations. Each new challenge demanded fresh energy, but Edison's perseverance was inexhaustible. He was already dreaming of a world where every home glowed with light. His discipline extended beyond work hours, because for Edison there were no hours. Time flowed differently in his world. Days and nights blended together, divided only by the flicker of lamplight or the first rays of dawn filtering through the workshop windows. Assistants sometimes found him asleep on a bench, a notepad still in his hand. He would wake, rub his eyes, and immediately resume where he had stopped, as if sleep were merely a short pause in an endless experiment. What made his perseverance so remarkable was not just its intensity, but its constancy. He did not rely on bursts of inspiration. He worked with the regularity of a machine, consistent, focused, and unrelenting. It was that discipline that allowed him to complete over 1,000 patents in his lifetime. He once said, "I start where the last man left off." He didn't need to be first. He needed to be the one who finished the work others abandoned. Even in failure, Edison's persistence inspired those around him. When an early version of his electric distribution system exploded during a test, many engineers panicked. Edison, however, calmly examined the wreckage, took notes, and ordered another round of testing. His composure came from his understanding that every failure revealed a law of nature, and nature never lied. The same perseverance that powered his inventions also shaped his philosophy of life. He believed that work was not just a means to success, but a way of living truthfully. He despised idleness and considered curiosity without effort a waste. Opportunity, he said, is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. To him, greatness was not born from talent, but from tenacity. As his empire of invention expanded, from the phonograph to motion pictures, from electrical grids to storage batteries, his work ethic remained the same. He approached every new idea with the same intensity as his first. No amount of fame dulled his hunger. Even in old age, when his hands trembled slightly and his hearing was almost gone, he still walked through his laboratories, testing, building, questioning. His workers sometimes marveled at his resilience. One recalled, "And would come in at sunrise, and when we left at midnight, he was still there, pacing, thinking, drawing. We didn't follow a clock. We followed him." Edison's perseverance was not only physical but emotional. He endured criticism, financial setbacks, and fierce competition, most notably from rivals like Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse. Yet he never allowed rivalry to poison his focus. To him, challenges were fuel. When critics said his systems were flawed, he replied with better ones. When inventions failed in public, he went back to his lab and tried again. He did not seek to prove others wrong, only to prove that persistence was stronger than doubt. At the heart of Edison's work ethic was a simple truth: effort reveals genius. He believed that the human mind could solve any problem if given enough patience and persistence. For him, perseverance wasn't just a trait, it was the foundation of progress itself. When future generations looked back at his life, they often saw the light bulb as his greatest invention. But perhaps his true invention was something intangible: the culture of persistence. Through his example, Edison taught the world that innovation is not a gift but a grind. That genius is not an accident, but a discipline. And so, in those endless nights of labor, surrounded by sparks, tools, and half-finished machines, Thomas Edison built more than devices. He built a philosophy, a belief that the human spirit, if fueled by determination, could illuminate even the darkest unknown. His work ethic was his light, the light that guided him through every failure, every storm, every long night when success seemed distant. It was that light that would soon shine upon the world, brighter than anything the human eye had ever seen. The story of Edison's perseverance did not end when the first light bulb flickered to life. In truth, that moment was merely the opening act of a much larger drama, one that would test his endurance more severely than ever before. Once he had proven that electricity could illuminate a small room, Edison turned his ambition outward. He wanted to light the world. To him, the invention itself was only half the battle. The true challenge lay in bringing it to every street, every home, every factory. It was a vision so grand that even his admirers doubted it. But doubt had never frightened Edison. It was the fuel that ignited his will. He began constructing an entire system of power generation and distribution. something that had never existed before. This was not just an experiment in physics, it was a revolution in civilization. His team worked day and night to build generators, meters, fuses, and switches, each a new problem demanding endless testing. Menlo Park transformed into a city within a city, alive with the hiss of steam, the ring of metal, and the crackle of electric arcs. Reporters visited and left bewildered by the scale of his effort. They saw a man possessed, a man for whom obstacles were simply invitations to work harder. Edison's daily life followed a punishing routine. He would wake at sunrise, walk directly to the lab, and not leave until his body could no longer move. He ate little, slept less, and wrote constantly. His notebooks multiplied by the hundreds, pages of diagrams, formulas, and rough sketches, each line recording the relentless march of his thoughts. When exhaustion overtook him, he would curl up in a corner or on a workbench, nap for an hour, then rise to continue as though nothing had happened. His assistants sometimes counted the hours. They stopped when the number passed 72. Even then he remained cheerful, almost playful, as if fatigue were a stranger he refused to acknowledge. That cheerfulness was one of his greatest strengths. Edison never treated perseverance as suffering. To him work was joy. He loved the chase of discovery, the delicate game of guessing what nature might reveal next. When others groaned about long nights, he laughed and told jokes, his face glowing in the lamplight. He made endurance feel light, even when it was crushing. This attitude infected his team. They began to see fatigue as a badge of honor. At Menlo Park, long hours were not punishment but privilege, proof that one was part of something world-changing. The public began to mythologize him. Newspapers called him the Wizard of Menlo Park. Yet behind the wizardry lay discipline, not magic. The public saw flashes of invention. His workers saw the grind. They saw him testing a single component hundreds of times, making microscopic adjustments, recording every result. They saw him discard weeks of work without hesitation if the data disappointed him. And they saw, above all, that he never slowed down. Rest, he said once, is rust. To remain sharp, the mind must keep moving, always searching. As his electric light system approached completion, he faced his greatest trial, the race to bring power to New York City. The challenges were immense, designing generators large enough to supply entire blocks, burying miles of copper cables under crowded streets, convincing businessmen and politicians that this strange new energy was safe. Accidents happened. Circuits blew, wires overheated, machinery failed. Rivals mocked him, investors grew anxious, newspapers predicted disaster. But Edison refused to be shaken. When others panicked, he tightened his focus. Each failure became another problem to solve, another reason to work harder. Finally, in 1882, the lights of the Pearl Street station came on. The first electrical grid in human history illuminated Lower Manhattan. The crowd gasped as gas lamps faded and a new, steady glow filled the streets. That light was not just a technological triumph, it was the visible embodiment of perseverance. Every glowing filament carried within it the hours, the failures, the sleepless nights of the man who refused to quit. Edison watched the city shimmer and smiled quietly. For him, the victory was not in the applause, but in the proof that hard work could bend reality itself. But his journey did not pause. Even while the world celebrated his light, Edison's mind had already moved on. The phonograph, the storage battery, the motion picture camera, each new idea demanded its own decade of endurance. With every invention came fresh setbacks, bankruptcies, lawsuits, and betrayals. He was deceived by partners, robbed by competitors, criticized by the press. Yet none of it could extinguish his fire. He approached every challenge with the same refrain: "There's a way to do it better. Find it." To him, failure was never personal, it was procedural. The only sin was giving up before the process was complete. In 1914, that philosophy was tested by tragedy. One winter night, a fire broke out in Edison's factory complex in West Orange, New Jersey. The flames consumed everything: buildings, laboratories, prototypes, records. Years of labor vanished in a few hours. The blaze painted the sky red while Edison's family and employees watched helplessly. His son Charles found him standing near the burning ruins, illuminated by the inferno. Expecting to see despair, he instead saw calm. Edison turned to him and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." The next morning, surveying the ashes, he declared, "Disaster. Nonsense. We'll start rebuilding tomorrow." Within weeks the work resumed. The fire had taken his property but not his perseverance. "I am too old to make excuses," he said. "We'll start again." That sentence revealed the core of his genius, the refusal to let loss define him. As he aged, his hearing deteriorated almost completely. The silence might have broken another man, but Edison adapted. He read lips, wrote notes, and relied more heavily on observation. The world became quieter, but his inner voice grew louder. Deafness, like every other limitation in his life, became fuel for focus. He once joked that the silence helped him concentrate. Even nature's attempt to slow him down became another reason to push harder. His later years brought both triumph and fatigue. The world had changed, electricity was everywhere, industries had multiplied, and a new generation of inventors had arisen. Yet Edison continued to arrive at his lab each morning, still sketching, still experimenting. Visitors who expected to meet a retired celebrity found, instead, an old man covered in dust, arguing with his assistants about chemical reactions. When asked why he kept working, he replied simply, "Because there's so much left to do." That single line carried the weight of a lifetime's philosophy. That perseverance was not a phase, but a way of existing. Those who knew him best understood that his genius could not be separated from his discipline. It was not the spark of divine inspiration that made him extraordinary, it was the endless effort to keep that spark alive. He lived by repetition, by persistence, by a stubborn belief that effort could carve a path through any obstacle. His mind was a workshop where ideas were hammered into reality, one strike at a time. And though he held more than 1,000 patents, the true legacy he left behind was a mindset that success belongs to those who outlast failure. When journalists asked him to define genius, Edison offered many versions of the same thought: genius is hard work, stick-to-itiveness, and common sense. He did not romanticize creativity. To him, imagination without execution was nothing. A great idea, he said, was only valuable when pursued through sweat and patience. This belief distinguished him from dreamers who gave up when results didn't come quickly. Edison taught that perseverance transforms dreamers into doers. Even in his final decade, when his body weakened and his hair turned silver, his drive remained relentless. He worked until the very end, tinkering with improvements to storage batteries that could one day power electric vehicles. Friends urged him to rest, to enjoy the wealth and recognition he had earned. But Edison couldn't stop. His identity was bound to effort. Rest would have felt like erasure. "I can't be idle," he said. "My brain won't let me." In that confession lay both the burden and the brilliance of his perseverance. On October 18, 1931, Thomas Alva Edison passed away in his home. As news spread, lights across America were dimmed in tribute. For one brief minute, the world he had illuminated returned to darkness. A symbolic pause to honor the man whose labor had conquered the night. Yet even as cities stood in shadow, his spirit endured. Every street lamp, every glowing bulb, every hum of current whispered the story of a man who refused to rest until he had given light to humankind. Historians have debated how to measure Edison's genius. Was it his intellect, his vision, his innovations? Perhaps, but deeper than any of those was his endurance. He proved that perseverance itself is a form of intelligence. The intelligence of persistence, the logic of patience. He showed that creativity is not a moment of brilliance, but a lifetime of effort. His achievements were not miracles, they were milestones along a road paved by persistence. To watch Edison's life is to witness the transformation of labor into art. His workshop was his canvas, his tools his brushes, his persistence the paint that colored every invention. He taught that the beauty of human potential lies not in flashes of inspiration, but in the courage to keep working when inspiration fades. Through his example, he turned work ethic into a kind of poetry, a rhythm of effort and reward, of darkness and light. Generations later, his lesson still burns bright. Every inventor hunched over a desk, every scientist facing repeated failure, every creator doubting their progress. They all inherit a fragment of Edison's spirit. His story reminds them that success is rarely sudden, that the path of discovery is long and lonely, and that perseverance is the bridge between imagination and reality. The modern world, filled with instant results and fleeting attention, still stands on the foundation he built. The belief that progress belongs to the patient. In the silence after his death, one can almost imagine the faint hum of his laboratory still alive, the whir of machines, the scratch of pencils, the echo of his voice saying, "Keep at it. There's a better way." That echo stretches through time, reaching every person who dares to create. It is the whisper of work itself, the reminder that greatness is earned, not granted. Thomas Edison's relentless work ethic was more than personal ambition, it was a philosophy of life. He believed that perseverance was not optional but essential, that the human mind achieves its highest potential only when tested by hardship and repetition. He saw struggle not as suffering but as refinement, shaping character the way heat tempers steel. Through his life, he proved that the line between failure and success is drawn by endurance. And so, when we speak of Edison's genius, we must remember the deeper truth: his inventions were born not merely of intellect, but of will. The same will that worked through the night, that laughed in the face of exhaustion, that rebuilt from ashes, that never surrendered to doubt. That will, steady, stubborn, shining, is the light that still glows in every corner of our electrified world. It began in a small room, under the faint flame of an oil lamp. It lives on wherever determination meets possibility. That is the legacy of Thomas Alva Edison, the man who proved that perseverance itself is the purest form of genius. The year was 1877, and the workshop at Menlo Park throbbed with restless energy. Tables cluttered with brass cylinders, wires, and scattered notebooks caught the light of flickering gas lamps. The smell of machine oil, warm metal, and ink hung heavy in the air. At the center of this storm of invention stood Thomas Alva Edison, sleeves rolled up, hair disheveled, eyes fixed on a small rotating cylinder of tinfoil. In that instant, he was not simply an engineer, he was a man standing on the edge of a miracle. What he was about to create would allow humanity to hear its own voice captured in time. The phonograph, the first machine to record and reproduce sound, would forever change how people experienced life itself. To understand how Edison reached this moment, we must return to the rhythm of his mind. A rhythm that never stopped questioning. The idea began not with music but with telegraphy. Edison had spent years perfecting telegraph transmitters that could send messages faster, even recording dots and dashes automatically. He wondered if mechanical pressure could inscribe electrical signals, could it also inscribe the vibrations of the human voice? It was a thought so radical that even his assistants hesitated to believe it possible. But Edison was never frightened by impossibility. He considered the challenge with the calm of a man accustomed to rewriting the laws of experience. The experiment was simple in appearance, almost crude. A thin diaphragm attached to a stylus rested against a sheet of tinfoil wrapped around a cylinder. When he spoke into the mouthpiece, his voice made the diaphragm vibrate, and the stylus pressed those vibrations into the foil in tiny grooves. Then, turning the cylinder again, the stylus retraced the grooves, and, impossibly, sound came back. "Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow," Edison recited, and moments later, his own voice echoed from the device, ghostly yet alive. The room fell silent. For the first time in human history, sound had been captured and replayed. The impossible had spoken. Word of the discovery spread like wildfire. Newspapers called it sorcery. Scientists and laymen alike traveled to Menlo Park to witness the talking machine. Some laughed nervously, others crossed themselves, unsure whether to feel awe or fear. There had always been drawings, writings, and photographs, ways to record what people saw, but sound, the invisible essence of presence, had always vanished into air. Now it could be preserved, replayed, repeated. Edison had not merely invented a device, he had discovered a new dimension of memory. In those first demonstrations, Edison's face revealed a mix of triumph and curiosity. He did not linger on the applause. Instead, he examined the grooves on the tinfoil and thought of improvements. The sound was faint, distorted, and fragile. The foil tore easily, the recordings could not last. "It talks," he said, smiling, "but it doesn't sing yet." That single remark captured the essence of his genius. Satisfaction never stayed long enough to rest. Every success became a starting point for another experiment. He soon replaced the tinfoil with wax-coated cylinders, more durable and precise. The recordings grew clearer, the voices more lifelike. Crowds gathered to hear laughter, speeches, even music replayed by the strange machine. It was as though souls were trapped in cylinders, waiting to be released. The phonograph began touring exhibitions, astonishing audiences from New York to London. Newspapers published poetic tributes. "Edison," wrote one reporter, "has given us the power to recall the dead." For the first time, people realized that sound, fleeting, emotional, human, could become eternal. The implications rippled far beyond entertainment. Edison imagined the phonograph as a tool for business correspondence, dictation, and education. He envisioned a future where families could preserve the voices of their loved ones, where history itself could be heard instead of read. He dreamed of libraries of sound, filled with speeches, songs, and languages from around the world. Every new possibility fed his restless creativity. To him, the phonograph was not a novelty but a new frontier, the beginning of what he called talking machines. Yet progress, as always, demanded perseverance. The early phonographs were delicate and expensive, their recordings inconsistent. Rivals emerged, seeking to profit from his idea. Some improved on the design, others copied it outright. Lawsuits followed, and markets shifted. Still, Edison refused to abandon his creation. He withdrew from the public spotlight and began re-engineering the device from the ground up. The lab once again filled with the sound of scraping metal and humming motors. Assistants tested new diaphragms, experimented with recording speeds, refined stylish shapes. Each failed experiment brought Edison closer to success. During those long nights, the phonograph became more than a machine to him. It became a conversation between man and nature. He would speak into the horn, listen to the playback, and reflect quietly, as though in dialogue with his own echo. Sometimes he laughed at how mechanical his voice sounded, other times he frowned and adjusted the pressure of the needle. "The machine has to feel," he muttered once, "before it can sing." It was an odd statement, but it revealed his deeper philosophy, that invention was not just mechanical precision, but emotional understanding. The phonograph, to Edison, was a bridge between science and sentiment. As the device improved, so did its influence. By the late 1880s, recording studios began appearing in major cities. Musicians, orators, and actors stepped before the horn to preserve their art. For the first time, the performance outlived the performer. Families gathered around phonographs to hear voices from distant lands, to share songs, to experience sound as a shared miracle. Society began to change in subtle ways. Communication, once bound by time and presence, now crossed both. Memory itself gained a new form, audible, permanent, intimate. Edison's creation also stirred profound philosophical questions. What did it mean to hear the voice of someone who had passed away? Could sound, like a photograph, hold a piece of the soul? Some religious leaders warned that tampering with the natural decay of sound bordered on the unnatural. Others embraced it as evidence of divine ingenuity expressed through human hands. Edison, practical as ever, ignored metaphysics. To him, it was simple. Nature offered patterns, and man's task was to capture them. The phonograph was just another manifestation of that eternal pursuit. Behind his calm logic, however, there was wonder. Though Edison rarely spoke of emotion, witnesses recalled moments when he would play an early recording alone, sitting in the dim glow of a lamp, smiling faintly as his own voice filled the room. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by noise, the click of telegraphs, the whir of engines, the chatter of workers, the sound of his own recorded words carried a rare stillness. It was the sound of time folding back upon itself. As the machine entered homes, factories, and parlors, it transformed society's relationship with art. Music no longer belonged only to those who could attend concerts. It could now travel anywhere. The voices of great singers, once heard only by a few hundred, reached thousands. Later generations would refine the phonograph into the gramophone, the record player, the radio, and ultimately the digital audio of the modern world. But the lineage began in that small workshop, with Edison turning a cylinder and listening to the whisper of tinfoil. The economic impact was equally remarkable. The phonograph industry birthed recording companies, retail stores, and new professions. Sound engineers, recording artists, and audio manufacturers found livelihoods in a market no one had imagined a decade earlier. Edison's laboratory had, once again, not only invented a technology but an entire ecosystem around it. He had created a new economy of sound, a symphony of innovation and enterprise. The phonograph also altered how humans perceived time. Before it, memory depended on writing, photography, and storytelling, all static representations. With recorded sound, moments became dynamic, replayable. People could revisit a laugh, a lullaby, a speech, or a song exactly as it had been. It blurred the boundary between past and present. For the first time, history had a voice. Scholars of the future could not only read about events, they could listen to them. Edison had given humanity a second sense of memory. He himself saw it as part of a larger vision. The mechanization of communication, the phonograph, telephone, and motion picture were not separate achievements to him. They were pieces of one grand puzzle, the mastery of sound and image. He dreamed of combining them, of seeing and hearing the past simultaneously. Though the technology was not yet ready, his imagination foreshadowed the age of film and multimedia that would follow. Once again, Edison's perseverance outpaced his era. Through all the fame and acclaim, Edison remained, at heart, an experimenter. Even when he became a celebrity, honored by kings and presidents, he spent his evenings at the workbench, hands stained with grease, tinkering with needles and diaphragms. He never accepted perfection. "There's always a better way," he would mutter, adjusting screws as journalists waited outside. For him, invention was a verb, not a noun, an ongoing act of discovery, not a finished masterpiece. By the end of the 1880s, the phonograph had entered mass production, and its descendants spread across continents. Villages that had never seen a theater could now hear music. Schools used recordings to teach pronunciation and languages. Scientists recorded animal sounds for the first time. Anthropologists captured the songs of indigenous tribes, preserving cultures on the brink of disappearance. What began as an experiment in a cluttered lab had become a tool of global memory. Edison's personal attachment to the phonograph never faded. Among his many inventions, it remained his favorite, perhaps because it connected science to emotion more directly than any other. "The phonograph," he said once, "speaks the language of the heart in the tongue of the machine." That sentence revealed something intimate, a rare glimpse of sentiment from a man usually defined by pragmatism. The phonograph was not only his invention, it was his conversation with humanity. As Part A of this exploration draws to its quiet close, the image returns to that first moment in Menlo Park, the dimly lit room, the rotating cylinder, the faint echo of "Mary Had a Little Lamb." The sound that startled a handful of men would soon ripple through centuries, shaping how the world heard itself. Edison could not have known that the fragile grooves of his tinfoil would evolve into vinyl, magnetic tape, compact discs, and digital files, yet every modern recording, every song streamed across the globe, still carries the ghost of that first vibration. It began with one man listening to his own voice for the first time. and realizing that time could now remember sound. The phonograph marked a turning point not only in Edison's career but also in the story of human civilization. After its invention, the world around him began to change in subtle yet profound ways. Sound, once fleeting and untouchable, now became a form that could be replayed, analyzed, and preserved. Newspapers called it the talking machine, and for many it was almost magical. People could hardly believe that a voice could come from a simple cylinder wrapped in tinfoil. Edison's laboratory in Menlo Park turned into a place of pilgrimage for journalists, musicians, and curious onlookers who wanted to witness this miracle firsthand. When they heard Edison's recorded voice played back, some gasped, others laughed, and a few even prayed. For the first time in history, humanity had conquered time, capturing a moment and letting it live again. As the initial excitement spread, Edison began improving his design. He replaced the tinfoil cylinder with wax, creating clearer sound and longer, lasting recordings. He visualized a world where the phonograph would read books aloud to the blind, preserve family memories, and spread knowledge to distant lands. His vision was not limited to entertainment. He saw it as a tool of education, culture, and communication. In his notebooks, he wrote about the phonograph being used for language learning, dictation, and even for recording historical speeches, ideas far ahead of his time. Edison had once again proven that invention was not just about solving problems, it was about imagining new possibilities. The phonograph's impact reached beyond laboratories and exhibitions. It entered the hearts of people. It changed how humanity experienced emotion through sound. Before this invention, music existed only in live moments. Once played, it was gone forever. But now, melodies could be captured, stored, and shared across generations. A mother's lullaby, a famous singer's voice, or a historic speech could echo through time. The phonograph gave humanity a new relationship with memory, making sound eternal. It was as if Edison had built a bridge between the present and the future, allowing voices to outlive those who spoke them. Edison's laboratory soon became the birthplace of new innovations built upon the phonograph's success. His team of engineers, machinists, and assistants worked tirelessly to refine every mechanism. They experimented with materials, motor speeds, and sound amplifications, often through long nights of trial and error. The workshop buzzed with energy, metal clinking, cylinders spinning, and Edison's deep voice calling out instructions. He was not just an inventor, he was a conductor orchestrating a symphony of ideas. Each failed experiment was another note in the music of discovery, and Edison conducted it with passion and precision. The phonograph also paved the way for the birth of the modern music industry. Before its invention, musicians earned their living through live performances only. With Edison's device, recordings became products. Music could now be mass-produced, distributed, and enjoyed in homes. This changed not just entertainment, but also economics and culture. People no longer needed to attend concerts to hear the greatest artists of their time. They could bring the music home. Edison's talking machine democratized art, making it accessible to everyone, regardless of wealth or location. In business, the phonograph inspired a new era of communication. Edison envisioned it being used for office dictation, allowing executives to record letters and memos instead of writing them. He saw it as a tool to make industries more efficient and voices more powerful. Even though typewriters and telegraphs dominated the business world, Edison's invention introduced a new idea: that the human voice itself could be recorded as a message. In a way, the phonograph laid the foundation for the future of voice communication, from telephone recordings to modern-day digital audio. Edison's relentless improvements turned the phonograph from a novelty into a cornerstone of modern media. But it wasn't without challenges. Competitors began to emerge, some inspired by Edison, others attempting to outdo him. The race to improve sound recording technology intensified, leading to innovations like the gramophone and disc records. Yet, through it all, Edison remained proud of his creation. He believed that the phonograph represented the true essence of invention. an idea born from curiosity that evolved through persistence. Even as others refined and expanded upon his work, Edison's contribution stood as the spark that started it all. The deeper meaning of the phonograph extended into philosophy. It changed how humans perceive time, memory, and existence. For centuries, people relied on writing and imagery to preserve the past. Now, they could preserve something far more intimate: the human voice. The sound of a loved one, the laughter of a child, or the final words of a great leader could be recorded and relived. Edison had unknowingly given the world a form of immortality through sound. In museums and archives today, those early recordings remain, fragile yet alive, whispering the voices of the 19th century into the ears of the future. In his later years, Edison reflected on his creations with both pride and humility. He saw the phonograph not as an isolated achievement, but as part of his lifelong mission to improve the world through practical invention. "Anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent," he once said, highlighting his belief that true innovation must serve humanity. Yet the phonograph's value transcended money. It touched lives, preserved emotions, and connected generations. It was proof that science and art could meet in the same machine, and that invention could carry soul as well as function. As electricity began to light the cities and motion pictures started to capture moving images, the phonograph remained a symbol of Edison's early genius. It was the seed from which entire industries sprouted: music, film, broadcasting, all rooted in the idea that human experiences could be recorded and replayed. Each time a record spins, or a song plays through speakers, a fragment of Edison's dream comes alive. His voice may have faded, but the echo of his imagination still vibrates in every note of music, every spoken word recorded, and every piece of sound technology that continues to evolve today. Thomas Edison's phonograph was more than an invention, it was an awakening. It taught the world that sound could be eternal, that memories could be mechanical, and that invention could give voice to time itself. In the quiet hum of that first spinning cylinder, a new world began. A world where voices never truly die, where music never stops, and where the human imagination, once set in motion, continues to play forever. The invention of the electric light bulb was not just a triumph of science, it was a triumph of human determination, vision, and the relentless pursuit of a dream. Before Thomas Edison's light illuminated the world, nights were ruled by darkness. Streets were lit by flickering gas lamps, homes glowed faintly from candles or oil lamps, and the boundary between day and night was absolute. The world slept early, bound by the limits of nature's light. But Edison saw the world differently. He imagined a future where light could conquer darkness, where human progress did not need to pause when the sun went down. His dream was to give the world endless day. In his Menlo Park laboratory, Edison began what would become one of the most intense and transformative experiments of his career. He and his team tested thousands of materials, searching for the perfect filament, something that could glow brightly, last long, and be produced cheaply. The process was grueling. Day after day, his workshop was filled with the glow of failed experiments, burnt filaments, and shattered glass. But Edison refused to surrender. He often slept only a few hours, working tirelessly under dim gaslight, driven by the vision of a world forever changed. When asked about his failures, he famously replied, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That statement became the anthem of innovation. At last, after countless trials in 1879, Edison and his team succeeded. Using a carbonized bamboo filament, he created a bulb that could burn continuously for over 200 hours. For the first time in history, artificial light was practical, reliable, and safe. When Edison switched on his invention, the soft, steady glow filled the room, banishing the shadows that had dominated human life for centuries. The moment was electric, literally and spiritually. It was as if humanity had captured a piece of the sun itself and placed it in a glass globe. News spread quickly, and soon, people from across the country came to Menlo Park to witness the miracle of electric light. Edison's invention did more than illuminate homes, it illuminated civilization. The light bulb transformed industries, extended working hours, and revolutionized modern life. Factories could now run around the clock, cities could stay awake and alive after sunset, and education could continue into the night. Humanity's productivity and creativity were no longer bound by daylight. The world began to pulse with new energy, and society entered an age of progress that would define the modern era. The invention symbolized hope and human potential, proving that darkness, literal or metaphorical, could always be overcome by persistence and imagination. Yet Edison knew that a single light bulb was not enough. To truly change the world, electricity itself had to be made available to everyone. So, he turned his focus to building an entire electrical system, a network that could generate, distribute, and control electric power. He designed generators, transformers, and distribution systems that brought electricity from central power plants into homes and businesses. In 1882, he opened the Pearl Street Station in New York City, the world's first commercial electric power plant. As the lights of Lower Manhattan flickered on for the first time, humanity stepped into a new age, the electrical age. The electric light bulb became more than just an invention. It became a symbol of enlightenment. It represented the triumph of human intelligence over nature's limits. The glow of Edison's bulb was the glow of progress, creativity, and the unstoppable spirit of innovation. Cities around the world began to sparkle with electric brilliance, and night lost its mystery and fear. The world was forever changed. Streets became safer, homes became brighter, and people began to live longer, more productive lives. In every glowing filament, there was a spark of Edison's genius and his belief that the impossible could be made real. As the years passed, electricity became the foundation for countless other technologies: telephones, motion pictures, radio, and the modern computer, all tracing their origins back to that single spark of light in Menlo Park. Edison's invention did not just light up rooms, it lit up minds. It inspired inventors, engineers, and dreamers to push the boundaries of what was possible. His light became a symbol of the human will to discover, to create, and to improve the world. When we look at the shining cities of the modern world, from glowing skylines to the light that fills our homes, we are still living in the glow of Edison's dream. He didn't just give us light. He gave us a future that never sleeps, a world forever illuminated by the power of imagination and perseverance. His light bulb was not the end of invention, but the beginning of an era where science and human spirit worked hand in hand to turn darkness into dawn. The phonograph and the electric light bulb were only the beginning of Edison's remarkable contributions. Equally transformative was his work in motion pictures, which gave the world the ability to capture moving images and tell stories like never before. In the late 19th century, before Edison's experiments, images could only be recorded in still form. Photographs captured a single moment, frozen in time. Life, with all its motion, remained elusive to cameras, yet Edison, ever the visionary, saw the potential to not merely preserve a single instant, but to record the flow of life itself. He imagined machines that could capture movement, project it, and bring images to life for audiences everywhere. It was a concept that bridged science, art, and human curiosity. In his Menlo Park and later West Orange laboratories, Edison and his team began developing devices to explore the mechanics of moving images. Inspired in part by earlier experiments with sequential photography and by the idea of persistence of vision, Edison envisioned a system where multiple photographs taken in rapid succession could create the illusion of motion when projected. It was a challenge that combined optics, mechanics, and timing, all within the limits of contemporary technology. Edison was relentless, driven by the knowledge that this invention could fundamentally change how humans shared experiences and remembered the world. The kinetoscope, one of Edison's earliest devices for viewing moving images, became a laboratory marvel. It allowed a single person to look through a peephole and watch a short, continuous motion picture loop. Though the concept was simple by today's standards, the technical challenges were immense. His team experimented tirelessly with film materials, sprocket mechanisms, and lighting conditions to ensure that images moved smoothly and could be viewed repeatedly without damage. Many prototypes failed, film broke, images blurred, or the mechanisms jammed, but Edison persevered. Each failure provided insight, guiding refinements in design and demonstrating the iterative nature of invention. Edison recognized that the true potential of motion pictures lay not just in technical mechanics, but in storytelling. His laboratories became centers of experimentation not only in engineering but also in narrative exploration. Short films, often simple scenes of everyday life or staged performances, began to emerge. Audiences were mesmerized by the novelty of seeing movement captured and replayed. Workers, politicians, and families could see dance, theater, and action in ways previously unimaginable. Edison had, in effect, created a new form of communication, one that transcended language, geography, and literacy. As Edison refined the technology, he foresaw commercial applications. He and his team established the Edison Manufacturing Company, which produced films and developed projection systems for public viewing. Early film exhibitions were revolutionary, drawing crowds eager to witness the spectacle of moving images. The kinetoscope eventually evolved into projection devices that allowed entire audiences to experience films simultaneously, laying the groundwork for the modern cinema industry. Edison's vision extended beyond mere novelty. He saw the profound cultural, educational, and entertainment potential of motion pictures, recognizing that they could shape public imagination, preserve history, and influence society. Edison's motion picture work also intersected with his relentless pursuit of intellectual property. He patented numerous aspects of film production, projection, and camera mechanisms, creating both technological standards and commercial control. While this led to disputes with emerging filmmakers and inventors, it underscored Edison's understanding of the strategic importance of invention. He recognized that innovation required both creative ingenuity and the careful management of ideas to ensure they could be developed, shared, and sustained. His approach to intellectual property would influence how industries, particularly those in media and technology, would operate for decades. The societal impact of Edison's motion picture inventions was immense. Film allowed people to witness events they could never attend in person, from political gatherings to cultural performances. It provided a platform for education, enabling demonstrations of scientific phenomena, historical reenactments, and storytelling that reached mass audiences. Motion pictures transformed entertainment, establishing new careers for actors, directors, writers, and technicians, and ultimately creating a global industry that became central to culture, communication, and commerce. Edison's initial experiments had set in motion a cultural revolution, one in which images could inform, inspire, and entertain on an unprecedented scale. Technically, Edison's work in film required innovations across multiple domains. Lighting had to be powerful and steady to properly expose frames, mechanisms had to move film consistently to avoid jitter, and lenses had to capture clear images. Edison and his team experimented with different materials, including celluloid film, which was more flexible and durable than earlier options. Each improvement, though incremental, compounded the effectiveness of the technology. The process of trial, adjustment, and refinement exemplified Edison's characteristic method: persistent experimentation, careful observation, and an unyielding belief that solutions could always be found. Beyond technical achievements, Edison's motion picture inventions expanded the human experience. They offered a new way to remember life's fleeting moments and to preserve memory in motion. Families could record performances, dancers could capture choreography, and scientists could study rapid movements in ways previously impossible. In essence, Edison had created a temporal archive, a means of freezing not a single instant, but a sequence of moments, allowing life to be replayed again and again. This profound change in the perception of time, experience, and memory underscored the philosophical as well as practical significance of his invention. Edison's contributions to film also reflected his broader philosophy of invention. He believed that technology should serve humanity, that innovations must have practical applications, and that persistence was essential to success. The development of motion pictures required not only creativity but also meticulous attention to detail, patience in experimentation, and resilience in the face of repeated setbacks. Edison's work ethic, demonstrated in countless earlier inventions, was central to the eventual realization of moving images as a viable technology. His dedication exemplified how genius is often less about sudden inspiration than about persistent, systematic effort. As motion pictures became more sophisticated, Edison continued to innovate. He explored synchronization of sound with images, experimented with color techniques, and worked to improve projection quality. While later inventors and filmmakers would take these ideas further, the foundation Edison laid was critical. Without his early experiments, the language of cinema, the visual storytelling, the techniques of filming, the industrial processes of production and projection might have evolved differently or more slowly. Edison had not merely invented a device, he had invented a medium, a way for humanity to see itself and its stories reflected back in motion. Ultimately, Edison's work in motion pictures illustrates the interplay of imagination, technology, and perseverance. He recognized possibilities where others saw only complexity, and he pursued them through systematic experimentation and unrelenting effort. The kinetoscope, early projectors, and the films his company produced were not isolated accomplishments, they were part of a continuum of innovation that transformed culture and society. By capturing movement, Edison extended the human capacity for expression, documentation, and entertainment, leaving a legacy that continues to shape modern media. Through motion pictures, Edison offered humanity a new lens through which to understand itself. He bridged science and art, engineering and storytelling, invention and cultural evolution. His work allowed ordinary people to witness extraordinary moments, preserved performances for posterity, and created a foundation for one of the most influential forms of communication in the modern world. The significance of his achievements lies not only in the technical devices he created but in the transformative power of those devices to enrich human experience. Edison's vision, diligence, and creativity combined to make the moving image a cornerstone of contemporary life, forever altering how we see and understand the world around us. Thomas Edison's contributions to science and industry extended far beyond the inventions that made him a household name. One of the most transformative yet often overlooked aspects of his work was his development of practical power systems, which fundamentally altered how society consumed energy and laid the groundwork for the modern electrical age. While the light bulb demonstrated the possibilities of electric illumination, Edison understood that an isolated invention could not change the world on its own. To truly revolutionize life, electricity itself had to be generated, distributed, and controlled on a scale that had never been attempted. This insight revealed not only his technical genius, but also his visionary understanding of infrastructure and systems. Edison's approach to power generation began with the construction of the Pearl Street Station in New York City, which became the world's first commercial power plant. He designed a system capable of providing continuous electricity to a dense urban area, a feat that required overcoming unprecedented engineering challenges. Generators had to be powerful and reliable, transmission lines had to withstand physical and electrical stress, and distribution networks needed safety mechanisms to protect users. Edison's team worked tirelessly, testing equipment under extreme conditions, modifying designs, and pioneering technologies that would become standard for decades. It was a monumental undertaking that combined electrical engineering, mechanical design, and logistical coordination on an unprecedented scale. The significance of Edison's power systems extended beyond technical achievement. It transformed society. For the first time, cities could operate beyond the limits of daylight. Factories could run night shifts, public spaces could remain illuminated, and urban life could continue after dark. The availability of electricity spurred economic growth, enabling new industries, extending work hours, and creating safer streets. Edison's system also demonstrated that energy could be treated as a utility, a concept that would define modern urban planning and industrial expansion. Through his efforts, electricity transitioned from a laboratory curiosity to a practical tool capable of shaping daily life. Edison was meticulous in designing not only the hardware but also the operational practices needed to manage a power grid. He developed monitoring and metering techniques to ensure consistent delivery, and he implemented safety protocols to protect both operators and consumers. His focus on reliability and standardization laid the foundation for the modern electric utility industry. By solving both the technical and administrative challenges of electricity distribution, Edison established a model for cities worldwide to follow, demonstrating that technological innovation must be accompanied by practical implementation to create lasting impact. The social implications of Edison's power systems were equally profound. With electricity, homes became safer and more comfortable, replacing the hazards of gas lamps and open flames. Schools and hospitals gained reliable lighting, improving education and medical care. Communities were connected in new ways, as electrical infrastructure enabled communication technologies, such as the telephone and telegraph, to expand. By providing a foundation for interconnected urban life, Edison's vision of electrification reshaped society's relationship with technology, energy, and progress. Edison's work in electricity was also characterized by relentless experimentation. He and his team tested different generator designs, voltage levels, and transmission methods, often encountering failures that could have discouraged lesser inventors. Yet Edison approached each setback analytically, recording results in meticulous notebooks and adjusting designs accordingly. This systematic problem-solving exemplified his broader philosophy of invention. Progress emerges not from inspiration alone, but from disciplined, iterative effort. His perseverance turned theoretical possibilities into tangible realities, creating technologies that were both innovative and practical. The industrial impact of Edison's electrification extended far beyond lighting. Factories and workshops could operate more efficiently with electric motors, reducing reliance on steam engines and manual labor. Businesses gained the ability to implement complex machinery and production lines, increasing output and productivity. The economic ripple effect was enormous. As new jobs were created, new industries emerged, and urban centers expanded rapidly. Edison's vision demonstrated that innovation could be a catalyst for societal transformation, linking scientific discovery with economic and cultural development. Edison's influence on the standardization of electrical systems cannot be overstated. He advocated for direct current, DC electricity in the early years, promoting safety and control, while later developments would favor alternating current, AC, for large-scale distribution. Edison's early work established principles of voltage regulation, circuit design, and consumer safety that remain foundational in modern electrical engineering. His insistence on careful measurement, testing, and control ensured that electricity could be delivered reliably, proving that visionary ideas must be grounded in technical rigor to achieve lasting impact. Beyond technology, Edison's electrification efforts also inspired cultural change. Cities and towns became vibrant centers of night-time activity, with theaters, shops, and public events flourishing under electric light. People could extend social and professional activities beyond daylight hours, altering daily routines and social structures. This transformation helped to accelerate urbanization and economic development, illustrating how a single technological advancement can reshape human behavior and societal norms. Edison's work in electricity also emphasized the importance of systems thinking. He understood that an invention's success depended not only on the device itself, but also on the infrastructure that supported it. By integrating power generation, distribution, and safety protocols into a coherent system, Edison ensured that electricity could be adopted widely and sustainably. This holistic approach foreshadowed modern engineering practices, where technologies are designed not in isolation, but as part of interconnected networks. His insight demonstrated that true innovation requires both vision and practical execution, bridging the gap between concept and application. Through his development of power systems, Edison transformed electricity from a laboratory curiosity into a practical, everyday utility that reshaped the modern world. His work illuminated homes and streets, powered industries, and enabled technologies that would define the 20th century and beyond. Edison's achievements in electrification exemplify the combination of creativity, perseverance, and strategic thinking that characterized his life, showing how a single visionary can change the trajectory of human civilization. In the glow of the first electric streetlights and the hum of early generators, one can trace the legacy of Edison's genius. His innovations were not limited to the laboratory, they extended into the rhythms of daily life, the structure of cities, and the evolution of technology itself. By making electricity practical, accessible, and reliable, Edison laid the foundation for the modern age. Every illuminated city skyline, every powered home, and every electric appliance carries a piece of his vision. His work demonstrated that invention is not merely the creation of devices, but the transformation of society, turning ideas into reality and possibility into progress. Thomas Edison's development of electrical power systems illustrates the profound impact that a single individual can have on the course of human history. By combining technical skill, relentless experimentation, and a visionary understanding of societal needs, he created the infrastructure that powers the modern world. Through his efforts, darkness was conquered, productivity was expanded, and human experience was fundamentally transformed. Edison did not simply invent electricity, he invented the way humanity interacts with energy, light, and progress itself, leaving a legacy that continues to illuminate our world today. Thomas Edison's legacy is defined not only by the inventions he created, but by the philosophy of relentless experimentation, perseverance, and practical ingenuity that underpinned his entire career. His seventh keynote, the principle that innovation is a product of persistent effort, tireless curiosity, and iterative problem-solving, captures the essence of Edison's genius. To understand Edison fully, one must recognize that his inventions were rarely the product of sudden inspiration alone. They were the culmination of years of careful observation, repeated trials, and an unyielding commitment to finding solutions where others saw impossibility. This principle, embodied in his personal and professional life, offers insight into the mindset that transformed the modern world. From the earliest stages of his career, Edison demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for focus and experimentation. Working in laboratories cluttered with instruments, chemicals, and mechanical parts, he would often immerse himself in a single problem for hours, days, or even weeks. For Edison, failure was not a setback, but a necessary step in the path to discovery. When attempting to perfect the electric light bulb, for instance, he tested thousands of materials for the filament, enduring repeated breakdowns, burns, and shattered experiments. Each failure provided valuable data, teaching him which materials, methods, and designs would succeed. To Edison, no experiment was wasted. Every attempt was a step closer to a solution. His approach combined methodical scientific investigation with practical hands-on problem-solving. Edison did not merely theorize. He built prototypes, tested them under real conditions, and refined them according to results. This iterative method allowed him to move from concept to application with remarkable speed. He believed that invention was not an abstract exercise, but a practical pursuit, aimed at creating devices that could improve lives, solve problems, or create new possibilities. It was this philosophy that turned the phonograph from a laboratory curiosity into a tool that preserved sound, the light bulb into a means of extending human productivity, and motion pictures into a medium that transformed entertainment and culture. Edison's work ethic was legendary. He often spent long hours in his laboratories, sometimes working through the night, driven by an intense curiosity and the desire to overcome technical obstacles. Observers reported that he worked in a state of near constant experimentation, adjusting, testing, and observing. His notebooks, filled with meticulous records, sketches, and calculations, provide evidence of a disciplined mind that combined creativity with rigor. Edison's persistence exemplifies a broader principle, that innovation is rarely a momentary flash, but a process of sustained engagement with a problem. Beyond technical perseverance, Edison's philosophy included a unique blend of vision and practicality. He was able to see possibilities where others could not, imagining applications of electricity, sound recording, and motion pictures before society was ready for them. Yet he grounded his visions in achievable methods, balancing imagination with engineering rigor. This combination of foresight and pragmatism allowed Edison to transform ideas into tangible inventions. It was not enough for him to dream. He needed to build, test, and refine until his vision could be realized in the world. Collaboration also played a critical role in Edison's iterative approach. His laboratories at Menlo Park and West Orange were bustling hubs of experimentation, staffed by assistants, engineers, and machinists. Edison encouraged creativity and experimentation among his team, fostering an environment where ideas could be tested rapidly. Mistakes were not punished but analyzed, success was celebrated but never taken for granted. Through this collaborative process, Edison multiplied his own capacity for innovation, harnessing collective effort while maintaining his guiding vision. Edison's principle of perseverance extended to his interaction with society and the marketplace. He understood that invention alone was not sufficient. Adoption required demonstration, education, and commercial viability. He tirelessly showcased his inventions, explaining their value, improving public understanding, and building infrastructure to support their use. From electric light to motion pictures to phonographs, Edison combined invention with strategic implementation, ensuring that his ideas would not remain confined to laboratories but would enter homes, schools, factories, and theaters. The broader significance of Edison's approach lies in its demonstration that human progress is rarely linear. Each invention was a result of countless incremental steps, repeated failures, and the courage to continue in the face of setbacks. Edison's life illustrates that genius is as much about resilience and methodology as it is about creativity. His persistence produced not only technological breakthroughs, but also a model of how innovation can shape society, laying the foundation for modern science, industry, and culture. Moreover, Edison's philosophy influenced generations of inventors, entrepreneurs, and engineers. His emphasis on experimentation, rigorous documentation, and practical application became a blueprint for innovation in the modern era. The laboratories he established were early prototypes of research and development centers that continue to drive technological advancement today. Edison's life demonstrates that creativity without persistence is fleeting, and effort without imagination is limited. True innovation requires the combination of vision, discipline, and the unwavering pursuit of solutions. In reflecting on Edison's career, it becomes clear that his greatest invention may have been the very process by which he created inventions. He transformed the act of experimentation into a systematic approach, a repeatable method for generating breakthroughs. He showed that even the most ambitious ideas, electrifying the world, recording sound, capturing motion, could be achieved through patience, perseverance, and methodical effort. By doing so, Edison provided a template not only for technical innovation, but for any human endeavor requiring sustained creativity and problem-solving. Ultimately, Edison's seventh keynote, the philosophy of relentless effort and iterative experimentation, reveals the heart of his genius. It explains why a single mind could generate so many transformative inventions, and why his work continues to influence technology, culture, and society more than a century after his death. Edison teaches us that failure is not an endpoint but a stepping stone, that curiosity and diligence together can overcome the seemingly impossible, and that the path to discovery is paved with persistent, thoughtful action. His life exemplifies the truth that true innovation is not a moment of inspiration, but a sustained journey of exploration, refinement, and unwavering dedication. Through his philosophy, Edison left a legacy far beyond the devices he created. He left a model for thinking, a method for inventing, and a lesson for humanity that progress is achieved not by shortcuts or luck, but through the patient, persistent, and deliberate pursuit of knowledge and its practical application. Every light that glows, every recording that plays, every moving image projected, carries a fragment of Edison's relentless spirit, reminding us that innovation is the child of perseverance, imagination, and tireless effort.